Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of the Artisan Traveller podcast. And it's not very often that I sit down with someone who's played guitars on my favourite albums, my favourite songs, but that's exactly what I'm doing today in the Manchester area with Mr. Aziz Ibrahim. How are you today, sir?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah.
Good.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah.
I've followed you for a while, and it's a pleasure to come and actually see the man and meet the man behind the music.
Yeah, you're always welcome up north.
Thank you.
Hospitality.
It's a lovely welcome.
It's hospitality, not hostility. You know.
And a man that makes a very good cup of tea, I should add as well.
Is that all right? Yeah.
It's perfect. Absolutely
Okay.
Spot on.
Cool.
So
You got to let it brew. You got to let it. You know.
we're getting into the physics of tea.
None of that southern dishwater. You know,
No,
got to let it brew. Proper builders brew that.
Yeah, strong stuff. That's just the way I like it. Perfect. So, why the guitar?
Quite simply, it's a symbol of rebellion. I mean, there's one reason. Initially, when I saw a guitar, which was at primary school, and these are the days of before your time, it was about I used to get free milk, you know, in schools, primary school, and then our teacher used to play the guitar. He used to get the guitar out and play it. So I was just like mesmerised by this instrument. But when I got my first guitar, which was like £5, and I started playing the guitar, to me it became this symbol of rebellion. Everything I saw about it, because I was into rockabilly at the time, and Buddy Holly and Elvis and Eddie Cochran and all the greats for me. And they were rebels. They were literally like, I mean, they had the flag, they're like Southern rebels or whatever, but they were rebels. And I realised that the instrument was my means of expressing myself in revolt against the kind of culture and religion that confines me to who I am, or I have to conform to in the sense of behaviour. And really, you know, I don't know, I'd rather be a free spirit, you know, in a sense, but still be a good Muslim, but or a bad Muslim, whichever. But at the end of the day, you know, it just became this thing where it was a release for me. The guitar, it could be noisy when I want it to be. It can be, you could hit somebody with it if you want to defend yourself, and
Comes in handy in long sight, doesn't it?
well, no, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's not like I go around in long sight playing the guitar and bashing people over the head with it.
Not anymore.
Never did. Not there. Never in long sight. And so it just became that instrument. It was a tool and an expression, a tool of expression and a tool of freedom and release and rebellion.
That's awesome. You've got a very unique sound as well from your Indian heritage.
Thanks.
The sort of almost like if I think back to Ian Brown's My Star, looking across the desert in the video, and you've got that kind of the Asian sound with then the more traditional kind of jangly Manchester sound. That's incredibly unique.
I mean, I'm a Manc first and foremost. I'm born and bred in Manchester, so that I think I hope it comes across in a way that maybe not necessarily about the relationship between the jingly jangly sound, but I mean that was a purpose. It was purposely crafted that way, because it's not just guitar that I play on My Star, it's all instruments, bar the guest artists on there, and it was more to do with the area. It was more to do with a kind of a long-sight attitude towards music, and Longsight's been a big firm support of the Stone Roses from day one. And you know, you drive through Longsight, you'll see their name plastered over walls in paint, Ian's name plastered over walls in paint, you know, across bridges and things like that. But as far as the sound goes, I mean, my parents were born in India, and then they became Pakistani after partition, and Mancunian when they left Pakistan. My dad worked. I got a job in Manchester, working for the Press Association and the Reuters. I had a part-time job as a copy runner there as well, so it was quite, for the Sunday People, it was a lot of fun going to the match, picking up the photographs for the Manchester Evening News Pink. So the afternoon edition, you get the pictures from the games, bring them back to the editors, and they end up on the print. So I had this part-time job. My dad was working here, and so that's all of my kind of Manchester roots really are there, and my kind of rockabilly roots are there. And at the same time, you know, I listen to music at home with the family home, and is traditional music, and the film industry is Bollywood. So all that got absorbed. And at the same time, the guitar took me into the worlds of reggae, soul, funk, hip hop, rock, metal, jazz, funk, soul, folk, Indian classical, Korean music, Japanese music, Chinese music, Taiwanese, and then Eastern European, and obviously American and European music. So it was all, I was just comparing, because I had that kind of ability to be able to move around different countries with ease, because I never had that kind of black and white key mentality to notes, where the piano is that way, unless you tune the piano strings in a way, because there are people who tune pianos differently to the 12-tone system. But I could hear the notes in between, and they were never out of tune to me, as I was not conditioned as a child to just understand black and white. The notes in between I could hear. So Arabic music or Northwest African music and Arabic Middle Eastern music kind of made sense to me. But I play the guitar, so I started to adapt my playing, even though the roots are rock and roll. I started to adapt it a little bit to these natural kind of tendencies to play the in-between notes and to understand the mentality of drones, or not like in say like Western or mainstream music, where you have it's chordal and it's about the substitution of chords and harmonization, whereas the Indian music to me was like the ability to improvise over a key, a specific key, and the improvisation and the timing of it, time cycles, not 4/4 or 3/4 or so forth. It would be 5 beat, 7 beat, 11s and 22s and 33 and a quarter or something. Things like that appealed to me, or were natural to me. So I think that's what developed my style, is that home life of having those Pakistani roots, and then combined with being a Manc and growing up. I never was, I never grew up with the roses in my blood in that sense, or any band related to that. At that time, I was moving from a prog rock group called Asia to the Stone Roses, so it was quite a transition, the genre of music. And that's the strangest part about it, is that my attitude to music has just been to enjoy it, no matter what the genre. I gave up playing sessions in about 20 years ago, so all I wanted to do was to just play in bands and write music, and I'd grown into being a writer and a songwriter and a lyricist after playing the guitar, because I thought, where do you go after this? I thought, well, you develop the guitar playing from writing music, writing songs, and songs which make sense to people. Might not make sense, or it's the wrong words, but I think more about they have some relevance, or there are hooks. You learn the craft writing, crafting of hooks.
So that's the basis
melodies.
Of the song. You'd then build it from the hook.
So meeting Ian Brown, for instance, and working with Paul Weller, and working with the Smiths, Andy Rock and Mike Joyce, was about them teaching me and showing me how great songs are crafted, and how the attitude of a person and the charisma of a person and personality can take over a song. And you can be minimalist about the music and the lyrics, but your influence on it through your own charisma and personality can affect people in such a way, draw them in, and it's more your character comes across. So it's character building and identity building, and I think there's one thing that really fascinates me is identity, because being South Asian heritage, identity is one of those things where we have conflicting ideas about, because one is a colonial identity given to us by our British colonial masters of 400 years of rule, and the other being an identity of growing up in wherever you grow up if you migrate, which my family did. So I've got this Mancunian identity which I relate very strongly to, but the other identity I have conflicting feelings about, because I believe that it's not a true identity in a sense. There's too much imperial colonial interference within it,
Yeah.
and it's constant classification in this country of are you a British Asian, British Muslim, British Pakistani, it's constantly being redefined. Probably more to do with immigration to do with anything else, but it's prevention of immigration, of all the Commonwealth countries and so forth. So identity and development in music for me is deeper than just hey, I play an instrument and that's that. It was, for me, the process is because of that influence on India, the British influence, the traumatic influence actually, that there's more to it for me, and I strive towards unique identity, in terms of musically the influences and the way that I play and the way that I'm not so much that I'm schooled, because I can't read or write music. I just picked up the guitar and put a record on and started learning a tune. But
it's all by feel, and
it's a feel, absolutely a feel thing. And my evolution is about being honest with myself and being honest to my culture as such, which is a Mancunian South Asian culture, and letting that flow. And the other thing that I learned from, even with my partner, Carrie, she works with The Fall and works with Dorothy Column and The Weeds and Thirst and been signed to. I even like writing music with her or just spending time with her. I kind of learned a lot more about the honesty of your playing, about putting yourself on the line, not having a fear of criticism of people, criticising you for playing badly or the notes are wrong or something, because I think that's where we lose track of what music is really about, that we're not honest about our playing. We practice all the time to iron out the human element, and I think that's so important to not iron it out. That's the character of a painting, that's the character of a poem, that's the character of art, the best artists for me are the ones that don't control the painting in a way. They're letting it flow. Everything flows and not correcting the mistakes, because the mistakes are the imperfections of humanity. And I think that's probably the best way of describing it. That you don't want to iron out the imperfections of humanity, because that's how people relate to you, your humanity.
Of course, yeah. You were on Simply Red's tour of 1987, 1988.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
I gotta laugh when you say that, because I was 20 odd years old. I never travelled. I never even wanted to pursue music as a career, to tell you the truth. Music chose me. I didn't choose music. And their management rang me up one day and said, "Do you want to join Simply Red? And we're on a world tour, literally in weeks. And can you get ready for rehearsals? And you'll be off to Italy first, 40,000, seat stadium, and then on from there to the world tour." So 1987 for me is such a poignant, moment in my life that I made a conscious decision about whether I was going to pursue I don't want to say it was my calling, but it was probably what my parents wanted, which was to be a doctor. And strangely enough, I still ended up a doctor with this honorary doctorate I got from Salford University. Strange, but that year, it's very important.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to ask me a question.
That's all right. No, not a problem. I was just going to say that with Simply Red, sort of going back to what you said before about the influences from other countries and other cultures. If you take a track like Fairground, for example, like I was listening to a couple of days ago, you've got like the Brazilian drums in there. You've got a different. Yeah,
he went that avenue, but I mean, I think you probably have to look more at. That's nothing to do with me. That's more to do with Mick Hucknall's agendas and character. I mean, I haven't seen those guys since 1988, to tell you the truth.
Incredibly, they're touring next year.
Well, I believe so, but I mean, I left that behind, and Simply Red, so I have no idea what goes on with them. It's not a band to me; it's an individual who hires the people that he works with. I don't. I won't express my personal opinions on air about him, but I moved on. I was very young, and I learned some very valuable lessons, and became and strived towards being a band person as opposed to being somebody him or people like him could hire. Which is nothing wrong with that, if that's where you want to be, but that's not where I wanted to be. But initially, what I discovered was that yes, he loved reggae music. He loved the Rolling Stones. So he had certain criteria in which I was employed, which, for instance, he wanted somebody who was versed in reggae music, which I had 10 years in reggae music myself, working with fantastic musicians like Freddie McGregor, Barrington Levy, Dennis Brown, the late Dennis Brown, and a couple of other heads as well in that, and my local bands in Manchester, Fourth Generation, T Dynamics. So I was well versed in reggae music. Maybe not a true reggae musician. I think you really need to be from the Caribbean to be a true reggae musician, or a descendant of. But I learnt a lot because they were so welcoming and taught me so much. And then guitar, I'd studied kind of, I grew up with Rolling Stones records, so Keith Richards and so forth, all the other guys too. I knew that, so I was versed in it, and to him that appealed. So I ended up in Simply Red. But the Brazilian influence, that came probably more from the success in Brazil, and also from Heitor, who was the guitarist that followed me. He's an absolutely fabulous musician, producer, and film score writer. If you look at some of the Hollywood films, he's there. I think that influence is probably more owed to him than it is anything else. Simply Red had connections with Italy. They were well loved in Italy, so they had big Italian connection. So hence they had properties there, and then the Brazilian element, like I said, when Heitor came in, then it had that big Brazilian influence. So that was after I'd left anyway. So that's all I've got to say about that.
Do you recognise any of your influences on Simply Red at all? Do you think there's anything that...
There was a tune we worked on. We used to work on tunes in sound checks before shows, and Mick would record them out front. So you could say we all had an influence on the tunes, or should have been given writing credits.
Of course.
But the way that it operated then, when you're new in a band, you don't cause, any job, you don't say anything, untowards. I mean, I did eventually, and that's how I ended up leaving the band, because the things I said were unacceptable, shall we say, to his dainty ears. But I'm trying to keep it clean for you listeners. But so on top of that, no, I mean, there's not much really to say about that.
What was it sort of an easy transition from Simply Red through to the bigger stage with the Stone Roses, for example, when John Squire left in '96?
There's a big gap. So 88 to 96.
Yeah.
I had moved from there to working with Errol Brown from Hot Chocolate. So I was doing a Hot Chocolate gig at that time with Errol Brown as his musical director, putting a band together, getting out on the road with him. And then Asia, writing an album with Asia, which is called Asia Arena. And then playing guitars on that and touring with Asia. And prior to that, a few other things. PM Dawn I did some work with. And then Rebel MC, which was probably one of the bigger gigs that I had, working with Mike West Down in London, and meeting a lot of the musicians at the time, the junglists, the drum and bass artists, and that was a great time. Did an album with them, Black Meaning Good, and then it was after all that. It was just after Asia. So I was transitioning through various phases, and it came to that. In actual fact, just before the Roses, I wasn't doing too well. I had no money, so I got asked to come and teach in schools. So I was teaching at a private school called Ellesmere College in Shropshire, and then that grew from one lesson to about 20 lessons, and then it grew from that school to a girls' boarding school nearby, Morton Hall, and then to Oswestry School, and then to Marches, a comprehensive, and all of a sudden, and the Oswestry College, and then all of a sudden I was teaching from Monday to Friday, all day and all night until 8 in the evening, and I was helping with the house music competitions, and I was a basketball coach, and then I was doing all this, so because I didn't have any money, and as a musician, you have to go to wherever your talents can get you. So I started teaching, and I was teaching all week, knackered by the weekends. And then I got a call from Robbie Maddox, who was the drummer in the Roses, who took over from Rennie, and he'd asked me if I'd be interested in coming in to help with demoing for let's call it the third coming, shall we? And he asked me if I'd be interested in playing the guitar, just so they could bounce off the guitar and I could play some of the things that they had in mind or whatever. So I just helped out, really. I think the John Squire kind of was keeping a low pro, and they hadn't spoken to him, so they had no idea what he was doing. And then when it did, the proverbial hit the fan, they kind of came back to me, asking me whether I'd be interested in working with them, being in the band. But I think that may have come after a few things, you know, ideas of maybe getting Slash in to play the guitar, or maybe getting, what's the name, from Girls' School to come in, you know.
Yeah, there were rumours, weren't there, about Slash coming in from Guns N' Roses?
I don't know about the rumours, but I can only tell you from inside the band.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, that sort of answers my next question. Really, was that how hard was it to play catch up with, you know, with obviously the Second Coming album that had a lot more technical guitar work?
Well, I mean, it wasn't hard at all. It took me about a week and a half.
Really? Well, even tracks like Breaking Into Heaven that are almost
that was so easy. I'm not saying that he's not a great guitarist. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that you've got to look at my background. My background is I learned from tape, of records, of vinyl. Just like any guitarist, you know, young kid starting out, I learned to play by listening from my ears. So if you play something in front of me, I can tell you how to play it without even learning how to play it straight away. Because I know the tone, I know the kind of guitar, I can probably tell you what kind of guitar's been played. If it's wear on the neck, I can tell you. I can tell you what kind of pickups, because I can tell by the aggression of the tune, the brightness of it. It could be Fender or Gibson or Gretsch or Rickenbacker. I can probably tell you about the amps, because I can tell the difference between Vox and Marshall and AC, you know, Fender amps, and sometimes the speakers. So when I heard the tunes, Second Coming was easier for me because it was more of a rock-based album. So to me, it was like, well, that sounds like really thin strings, 8th hours. It sounds like Jimmy Page, and it sounds like a Les Paul, and it sounds like a 335 and a Strat on different recordings, and an Echoplex. I heard the delay sound, so straight in my mind said Echoplex. So in a way, I'd analysed it already. It was only a matter of knowing, okay, I know, because I play such variety of world music, that the scales were confined to the blues and pentatonic, so the notes, I knew where the notes would be. So can you understand that for me it was like a no-brainer? I could work out the parts without actually playing them. That what was actually hard, it was different for the first album, because that classic album had influences of the Byrds, it had influences of Simon and Garfunkel and so forth. So with these albums, it's not the parts. The parts are easy to learn because they're melodic, and I can tell, you know, I learned parts like that all my life. So, you know, a week and a half isn't much to learn those songs. But what was difficult, I mean, I didn't even know about capos at the time, to tell you the truth. So I actually learned things like Waterfall without a capo, because I didn't know there was a capo involved. There was no YouTube at the time. So what was really difficult is it's the style of a player. John Squire has such a distinct, unique style of playing. I mean, you've got to bear in mind, he wrote what he played and probably wrote other things too. It's the uniqueness of the player that's difficult. Also, it's the style in which a person plays. To emulate being somebody, it's really difficult. For me, it is. You can play the notes, but you're not that person. You can never sound like that person. And that's what people buy into. So, and that's what I discovered afterwards as well, that, you know, no matter if I played it note perfect, people still didn't feel comfortable, because it's not John Squire playing it, and he has a way of playing which you can maybe spend all your life, you know, copying every single nuance, but that's what's, you know, unpredictable about a human being, the way that they think, and at that moment what they did. As you can see by the progression of the Roses' music, it progressed from that first album to those singles, and, you know, and that second album, and you can tell that the instruments have changed, and you can tell that, you know, you acquired this 1959 Gibson Les Paul, which I inherited, you know, along with all the other guitars like the Pink Resurrection Strat and things like that, because they became the band equipment. But joining the Roses and listening to John Squire play absolutely changed my playing, in the sense that I didn't want to be John Squire, but he did teach me that the individuality of his playing and the equipment that he used to create sound had every influence on the kind of individual sound elements of his And it woke me up to the fact that some of the things I was playing and using, they had no character. So everything I used from then on, I mean, obviously I was using his equipment, so they were, you know, mind-blowing bits of gear. You know, you don't. It's not every day you get handed a 1959 Gibson Les Paul and a 1959 ES345, which is off the Love Spreads video, and the Pink Resurrection Strat, and the 62 Strat, and the 64. You know, there's so many things, and the Echoplex, which I still have here somewhere, and you know, those things influence my playing so much. So, you know, coming back to what I was saying before, you know, it's not a slight on somebody to say that, yeah, I can learn, that's just me, I can learn pieces of music at the drop of a hat. I've had to, you know. And even after that, I was working with a guy called Stephen Wilson, who's from a band called Porcupine Tree, and he's a Grammy-nominated producer. You know, his music, it's complex and odd time signatures, but again, it's just about being able to learn things, you know, because my ears pick up things, you know. People learn to read and write music, but I taught my ears to learn and learn quickly and improvise quickly. And improvisation is at the heart of my playing, so like the arrogant mank, I can busk my way and blag my way through anything, really, you know.
Yeah,
even if I can't do it, I can pretend.
Of course. I mean, looking at it from afar, like obviously I'm not a guitar player myself, and what you just said about the fact that you can listen to a track, you know, whatever it may be, that John Squire's played, and then instantly get, you know, the sort of...
Or anyone's played. I can get the gist of it straight away, you know. I can picture the chords in my head. I can see in my head I can see where the hands are moving. I can tell by the brightness of the strings what part of the neck probably being played. Tonally, I can tell by the equipment on the guitar what kind of guitar, because I know guitars so well that I kind of... I mean, there's so many custom instruments these days, but I generally tend to kind of go off the player. If I know they're a very purist type of player, I know they're not going to be playing any other brand apart from Gibson, Fender, Gretsch, Rickenbacker, that kind of... If it's a more exploratory player, then I might go, well, he could be playing this. If it's a studio guy and he's maybe born to a certain era, then I would guess that he's going to use some kind of active pickups in the studio, and you can tell the sound of the pickups because they have this brightness and they always have a, you know, clinical tone. And there's people who play really, you know, it depends what you look at, the personality, you look at the age, you look at their influences, and you can kind of work out what they're going to use and what they like, and then you pick the items that go with that. It's like distortion and fuzz boxes, you know, even that has a sound tonally. You can tell, I can tell, you know, when I hear a fuzz face, it might be a replica of one, but at the end of the day, somebody's still trying to use the same circuit, or it might be a tone bender, like Mick Ronson used a lot on the Spiders from Mars and Bowie stuff, and I knew every single, you know, Spiders from Mars track, and I got asked to join the Spiders from Mars a few years back. This is before Trevor Bolder died, and God rest his soul. But I knew those tunes because I knew the equipment involved, and I knew about Ronno's, you know, Marshall, his big 200-watt head, and he's taking out half the valves and all these things, and the tone benders, Mark 1s and Mark 1.5 and 2s and 3s, and you know, there's so much to learn. There's so many areas of exploration.
Yeah, it truly is fascinating to hear the breakdown of how you can, you know, detect that sound, and obviously from the
sonic explorations.
Like not being a guitar surgeon or something. That's just, to me, like, as I say, looking from the outside in, it's just mind blowing to know that you can do that.
I mean, so many aspects to the rock and roll thing. I mean, one aspect is the rock and roll thing, you know. The other side is the actual playing part of it, you know, to talk about playing. I generally don't, I mean, I must admit, I don't do a lot of talking about the actual guitar playing. Not many people actually interview me to talk to me about what I played and how I played it and technique and things like that. And what I use, it generally tends to be about, you know, throwing TVs out of hotel room windows and what's it like, and Noel said this, and what's Paul Weller like, and blah, 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 and you were in the studio. So it's all a different kind of magazine. Yeah,
it's the science behind what you do.
But the science of it, I've never really done many interviews like for magazines like Guitarist, Guitar UK, whatever they're called. You know, they generally snub me. I don't think they recognise me as a valid or credible artist. I've had a couple of incidents in the past, insults that I've seen in magazines, which I thought was a bit out of order, and threatened to come down to the offices and not throw paint like the Roses would do, but the equivalent of.
I think it's a shame though, because thinking about it, actually, you don't really hear many interviews actually, about people's, the science behind the guitars, or the way that a sound is generated, or the experience that someone's had perhaps to get that sound to the point where you've evolved it from one thing to another. Like for example, the Edge from U2, that sound is completely unique, but no one really knows how that sound came to be. But by talking to people like you, we can detect how your sound's come through.
Yeah, I mean, people grew up with the music, they kind of know where it came from and how it came to be, and then it just becomes legendary because manufacturers start to give you that sound in equipment, and you can, it's a preset, or it's an algorithm within equipment, guitar pedals, or it's in, rack mount equipment. And I mean, if you look at the guitar world today, almost every single digital pedal that offers delays, echoes, offers you that shimmer sound that he kind of created with his studio engineers, producers, in putting that together with like pitch shifting and with delays, electro-harmonic style, deluxe Memory Man style delays, and the chorusing and the pitch shift on top of that, which adds this kind of organ shimmer. So, that's quite standard now for equipment. You can buy that, but it's amazing. It's kind of, it's legendary, that tone.
How it's come to be to that level where it's...
And each influential guitarist had that kind of thing where he had an influence on retail, on the retail of musical equipment, like Hank Marvin did with the Shadows when I was learning guitar, and I listened to the Shadows when I was younger. And everybody wanted a Fender Strat, and they wanted... he was playing Burns before that, but when you start playing that salmon pink kind of Fender Strat and pouring it through, his echo units, and it was kind of, wow, everybody wanted that kind of tone.
That's it, and then it rolls through the ages and becomes...
Yeah, I mean, you look at the history of rock music, the evolution of amplifiers and valve amplifiers when they came to be, and they used to be like PA systems, big, proud stacks in the background. But once the valve started to distort, then a new era came in of power, and obviously fuzz boxes came along then, and Mike, I've forgotten his surname, but developed the tone bender and all the Maestro and stuff like that, companies like that who created all the, when you hear on Satisfaction and you hear that first fuzz, and there's that's such an interesting history. That's what I like. Yeah. I wish I could see that in museums, walk in any museum and see this musical history as opposed to the bones and shit I normally see. But, no offence.
So after 96, do you kind of have a premonition that Ian Brown was going to head in a solo direction and the Roses would dissolve, or was it like
No, I didn't.
A surprise?
I had no idea. I was in the land of confusion. I had no idea what was going on. After the demise of the Roses, I had an inkling it was going to end, because I remember seeing, we were playing in London, and I walked into a pub in London. I don't know why we walked in there, but we were going to meet somebody or something, and Manny was sat there with Alex Nightingale from Primal Scream, and they were in conversation, and the lads around me were saying something. I can't remember who said something, but it made me think, something going on. And then after that, after he announced he was leaving and the demise in 97, I had no idea what was going on. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody told me anything. I read it in the papers, to tell you the truth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So one day, I mean, a couple of times I passed by Ian's house, and I passed by after that once, and Ian answered the door, and we were just having a chat over a brew, and he told me everything then. And that's when I really knew what had gone down. And that was the birth of the solo stuff, because he didn't say that he wanted to do, he was going to do this or he was going to do that. He was quite happy cultivating the garden and growing his beard. And
so a lot of people were saying to him, you should come back to music, or you should do something.
I'm sure they were, but he knew himself, and he knew that he was enjoying that kind of peace
Yeah.
after, giving himself probably time to think about it. Well, who wouldn't do that, you know? Give yourself some time to think about it. You know, the record labels and publishers would be clamouring at the door and the phone, and the only thing that Ian had was this fax machine. So he never answered the phone. It would always go to the fax machine, but he'd answered it if he recognised the number, his family or whatever, or friends he wanted to speak to. And that happened all the way through the process of the Unfinished Monkey business. That it wasn't... the fax machine was always on. We weren't looking for money from record labels or publishers, and Ian wanted to self-finance and just do this very organically and rough and ready in, you know, in his house and my house. Because I prepared the tracks in my house, really, like My Star and Corpses and What Happened to You and so forth, and Ice Cold. I just kind of, I was inspired because when I went round, we were just hanging out, and I was just, I'd pick up an acoustic guitar which he had lined about. I'd sound one of the Roses guitars, and I'd strum through a few chords, and that's how Corpses came about. I was strumming these chords, and he just went, those chords are great, and picked up a fag packet and started writing down some lyrics. And that was the birth of Corpses, and I rushed home and started working on it and finished a piece of music, a song or a format, came back with that, and then he finished his lyrics to that music, and then we so that process just continued like that, where we all of a sudden took up the interest of music in the way that you did as a child or as a youngster, where you were just playing with your mates in the small box room, and you had a guitar and you had something to record on and a tape machine or something. We just started recording these ideas down, and that was the birth of those tunes. My style was inspired, but I came home inspired, and I just wanted to finish a piece of music, so I finished that music and came back with that arrangement, and I got my brother to play. There's a lot of things on My Style that people don't hear. My brother is playing Indian Nal. It's like a tabla, but it's a loop. Because I had a 4-track, that's all I had at the time at home. 4-track cassette tape recorder.
We are going back.
Well, it was, 97 was when we split with the Roses. So 97 we started writing, and 98 was the release. So I started putting stuff on this cassette tape, and I put all of My Star onto it. And I'd worked out to synchronise an old sampler I had, an Akai S2000. And so it ran virtual tracks as long as the cassette tracks had recorded on a tape. So I'd finished the music, but I got my brother into Abdul, who'd come and played the Nal, which is like a double-sided drum, and it gives you the sound of like tabla. That's the closest thing it sound like, and that's what's on My Star, that you hear that loop. And then on other tracks as well, I got him to do some vocals on What Happened to You Part 2. He did like this Indian classical kind of chant in the background. I did the narration kind of thing to What Happened to You Part 2, just the Punjabi words on it and things, as well as obviously instrumentation. But there was things like that where I did have at home, and I asked my family to contribute that you don't know about. It was a family effort in a way. But the birth of them was so natural, and just the way that I grew up, as in writing tunes at home on a little piano key cassette player, and going to Ian, and he had an 8-track reel-to-reel, and we transferred 4 tracks over, and he had 4 tracks to play with for his vocals. Then we went down London to record at Chiswick Reach, all valve, all tape studio, and then we went to the Forge in Oswestry, at my friend's place, Phil. I introduced Ian to Phil and said, we'll come and record at his place, and we mastered there and recorded there, and the late Nigel Luby engineered the earlier sessions, and poor guy died a few years back, and we brought in Dave from Denmark, who did the production and engineered it, and he produced my first album for me in Denmark as well. So and hence came Monkey Business, and then at that time obviously the record labels were on the phone, and Ian decided he'd let it loose and released it through Polydor, and that was that.
That's incredible. Yeah. Just on the subject of your music, to round off what is now officially the longest podcast we've ever done on the channel.
Okay.
That's amazing. That's an achievement in itself, to be fair. It's been so fascinating listening to all the guitar science and obviously the background stuff with Ian and the Roses and Mick Hucknall as well. But you've got your own thing now, the Lord of the Strings.
My hashtag.
Your hashtag. Your ever.
Everybody needs a hashtag. So it's not that I think I am. It's just everyone needs a hashtag, and I thought
it's a great name.
Lord of the Strings kind of suited. But I mean, in this era now, I'm working on my own, and I'm working with friends and working with people I want to work with. But I'm working with in the arts. I'm on my third Arts Council grant. Arts Council England. I've been working with the British Council prior to that, touring Middle East, North West Africa, Jerusalem, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and it's fascinating. And then I'm working with like visual art and dance and other forms of arts and Indian classical musicians and at the moment Japanese musicians, and creating new musics, but all contemporary. I'm working more with EDM, with electronic music than I am actually as a band. Because that's what I love, and I love iOS, I love Android, so I'm working with palm-held devices, creating music and showing young kids how to create music from what you've got. Working with my laptop, I work with Ableton a lot, so I create a lot of electronic music. So in the kind of genres of trap and grime, the kind of areas I'm interested in, really. Working with rappers, spoken word, poets, any other art form really, apart from the guitar, and seeing what I can create and meeting new people and meeting youngsters who maybe, I'm doing a lot of lectures and seminars as well at universities and schools, even primary schools, which I'm enjoying, even doing stuff for the NHS, and Black History Month and equalities, diversities, inclusion, LGBTQ, whatever, it's just branching out, learning more, sharing more, and evolving, I hope, evolving to wherever it leads me.
It's fantastic.
Keeping it fresh.
Of course, yeah.
Fresh.
Well, that was an amazing insight into your world and obviously your history as a guitarist and a musician.
It's good to share, as they say.
Of course. And I really hope that you've all enjoyed listening, whether you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud or iTunes. You can subscribe on YouTube and iTunes. You can even subscribe as well on SoundCloud. Nearly forgot that. And of course I'll leave Aziz's details on the description box on YouTube. And thank you for listening for this podcast, and we'll see you again on the next one. Thank you.